Hello Earth signs Capricorn, Taurus and Virgo. Welcome to the Cancer New Moon. You'll find the timestamps for your rising sign listed below. Hello Capricorn Rising, welcome to your horoscope for the new moon in Cancer, happening on the 18th of July at 4:32 a.m. if you're in the southern hemisphere with me. So it's going to be an early morning moon. So if you'd like to get up really early, you can, but if you'd like to sleep in, then do it the night before. Do all of your spell work, your magic work, the night before on the Monday evening. Hopefully these will be out for you over the weekend so you can listen and prepare. This new moon is going to be darkening your seventh house of relationships. The seventh house is where we come into contact with our nearest and dearest loved ones and how we develop relationships with them. And at a new moon, when it's dark, we get to work with the energy that's left here on the planet, and we get to hope and wish and dream and ask for what we need. For you, what we need in relationships, what we need in love, what we need in collaboration. So think about that, think about the other, think about how you interrelate with other people, how you develop relationships, how you foster those relationships, how you put your skills, your practicality, your ability to kind of ground yourself and to show up and go the distance in that space, and make some plans for the future if you'd like to. An hour and a half after this new moon, at 6 a.m, the dragon's head will finally move into Aries, and this starts a whole new story. I've spoken about this a little earlier in the year, I think about 4 horoscopes ago or so, maybe 6. But the experience that you've been having over the past 18 months in relationship to your Taurian and Scorpionic self, so in relationship to your sense of community and your sense of individual self-expression, and how those power outages or power surges have shaped you and shaped your place in the group and shaped your contribution to that space. That story is wrapping up. That story is coming to crescendo. In fact, the last lunar eclipse in Taurus will happen in October of this year. It'll be the final reveal, the final chapter in relationship to how you're willing to express yourself. Then the new story that we're about to enter into, the new maybe instability, but I'm just thinking of the Tower card right now in Tarot. The Tower happens, it shows up for us when things were built on really unstable foundations. And sometimes I think about the Tower and I think about eclipses too, because it does give us the opportunity to look at things that we haven't looked at for a very long time. For you Capricorn, Aries rules your 4th house of your home and your ancestry. So, this is an invitation to go back. This is maybe going to be a period of time where you get to look at your ancestral lines and find the soft points, find the way through the next round of healing. The dragon's tail will be in Libra. So the dragon's tail will be allowing you to shed a little bit your public position, how you front up, how you want others to perceive you. I guess, is maybe what I'm saying, Capricorn. There might be some stuff that you can really let go of, finally, in that world. There can be some things that, masks that come off, finally. There may be ways that you kind of consider your legacy or what your life's work. There may be a redirection that starts to happen for you. It's valuable. I can only say that because I'm thinking back to when the eclipses were playing out in my 10th house and my 4th house, which was maybe 3 years ago now. And all that I had to let go of, all that I had to stop projecting. The 10th is really public. It's the top of the chart. So it's really where we kind of are seen. It's the most visible part of our chart. So the masks that came off, that there was no kind of, I had no say in it really. They had to shed. It had to shed for me to really focus on my bloodline, on my ancestry, where I came from, what support I lacked, but also what support has been with me the whole time, and what stories I could learn as I developed and got older about where I came from. The eclipses bring like power surges, power outages. They sort of like turn the lights off, or they like give a flood of new insight into that part of our life. So for the next 18 months, this might be a focus for you, Capricorn. There might be a real focus on bloodlines, homes, parenting. It might be an activated period of your reparenting yourself. It's powerful, and it's not easy. It's valuable though. It's really valuable. So that happens like an hour and a half after this new moon, that is sort of about your relationships. Also, we've got to really remember that Pluto is at 29 degrees in Capricorn. So there's still that kind of rebirth energy that's happening there. As a group, we look out and we see the everything being brought to the surface as far as the pitfalls of hierarchy. That's all playing out beautifully. If you open the paper, you'll see this person, that person, the other person being urged to stand down finally after their reprehensible behavior over this past period of time. More stories are revealing themselves about the advantage taken by people in positions of power and their reparations that need to be made right now for justice. It's kind of cool how the astrology works in that way. But I don't want to be too overtly kind of hard-nosed with you, Capricorn, because these are sensitive areas that we're discussing. And another thing to maybe keep in mind is that the planet Venus, who does bring with them art and connection and creativity and sensuality, will also station retrograde in Leo on the 23rd of the month. So a couple of days after this new moon as well. And Venus will be retrograde in Leo for the next 4 months or something like that. The last time that Venus was retrograde in Leo was in 2015. So if we think about our lives in 2015, and for you, Capricorn, I think, let me just count them out. I'm trying to, your 6th house of rhythm, of repetition, of work. What did your responsibilities look like in 2015? And what was being highlighted about your forged rhythm back then? Was there some sweetness that you could afford yourself in that area in 2015 that perhaps we can sort of go back to and incorporate into our lives now? I had a beautiful fortnight. I tell you what, from like the full moon in Capricorn up until now, I've had a real revitalizing period. I've really gotten to consider or reconsider my place in the group, and I've gotten to enjoy relationships that were gently waiting for me to re-emerge as the person that I am now, that I realize I've always been, and a hunger for like mobilization in community too. There's only so much that we can sort of lay down and submit and to sort of take. Sometimes we've got to be brave enough to stand up on behalf of ourselves, on behalf of our community too, on behalf of our people, sometimes on behalf of people that aren't a part of our community as well. When we witness injustice and we feel strong enough and able enough and ready enough to call it out, then we must. We've got to resist against this growing propaganda, the propaganda of our current situation. We all hold the oracle in our hand, don't we? Our mobile phones. We could learn and read and absorb anything that we could possibly want to. Some people are unconscious to that, but they still do it. They still go through that experience, you know. No one is kind of really separate from that. And there's a lot of people that are frightened right now too. They're really frightened for the planet, for the future, for their finances. And they're looking for something, a chink in the armor or like a chink in the wall, you know, like to let the light in. Also looking for someone to blame as well, because there's too much fear, there's too much caginess to, like sometimes we lash out. I think this Venus retrograde is kind of maybe teaching us a little bit about lashing out. I think the dragon's tail in Libra might have us lash out. And what it's kind of really up to us is to kind of not check ourselves, but kind of check ourselves, if I'll be honest, Capricorn, kind of really consider where our aggression or where our anger is being directed and to whom. The culture is growing in its language around individual identity, around claiming one's identity, about going inward to go outward. That can be really helpful and really useful. It can also really separate and divide us, where we lose our empathy, we lose our sense of kind of communal spirit. We've got to get back to that. We've got to get back to that, because that's the only thing that's going to see us through the next round. We can be fairly confident that Pluto's got our back and that Pluto is teaching gross violations of power, teaching them a lesson. The truth is that we've got to keep ourselves open to receiving the love, to finding the magic. That's the truth. When we feel embattled, we feel put upon, we feel exhausted by having to hold it all together on behalf of ourselves, on behalf of other people, having to hold this thing together. We lose track of like the magical parts of this life. And the point of being here in the first place, the point of being incarnated onto the planet Earth, you know, like this place could be heaven. I've said it before, but frick, it's right. I want this to be growing sense inside of you, Capricorn. I want you to feel autonomous and feel in harmony with your environment. Feel that you've got a handle on things and that what you're growing is going to be really worth it. And I want some contentment for you. I've got these two separate forces here, which are both authority figures and both very powerful. One speaks the absolute truth and doesn't let you really get away with a whole lot. The other one knows why, and they've got a lot of time to hear you out and to let you shake it off. Both are supporting you. Both are sort of guiding you into a certain direction. Hopefully this is the direction. Hopefully little Uma can help you remember the point of this whole exercise. The point of this whole exercise is to incorporate everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the preciousness of life. It's a gift. It's a gift that we sometimes can take for granted. And I reckon over the next years, we're going to come back to a place of wonder. We're going to come back to a place of hope as well. I see that. We're kind of in the thick of it at the moment. And all of this tension of this astrology over the next couple of weeks might have us, as I said before, like kick back. Just be mindful of who you're kicking back against. I probably wouldn't kick back against the Queen of Swords nor the King of Cups, because they've got your back. They've got your back. They want you to succeed. They want to hear you out too. Yeah, ancestral work, ancestral trauma. It's the most difficult stuff to reconcile, but it's also some of the most valuable. This is the story of life that you're writing for yourself, you know? I think it's really beautiful that your reaction, your impulse to what you've been through is to keep going, to keep looking for the point of it all. You can probably see that in these two cards here. Magic from birth, babe. Truth seeker. You'll find it. You'll find it. That's your reading, Capricorn. New moon blessings in your 7th house, your house of relationships. Say a little prayer. Ask for what you want. Ask for what you wish for. If you're still here with me, throw me a crab in the comments. That would be great. Little Cancer crab. I can read your birth chart or your tarot cards at umaruby.com. You can go and book yourself a session with me via my website. You can tip me at buymeacoffee.com/umaruby. And I'll be with you in 2 weeks and we'll talk all about the full moon in Aquarius that's coming on down the bend. So that will be in regard to your finances, your values, your money. So we get to release any shortcomings or any worries that you might have around that part of life in 2 weeks. I'll speak to you then. Love you, Capricorn. You take care. Bye. Hello, Taurus rising. Welcome to your horoscope for the new moon in Cancer, happening on the 18th of July at 4:32 p.m. if you're in the southern hemisphere with me. So it's an early lunation. So if you'd like to do your magical rituals the night before on Monday and have a sleep in on Tuesday, that's completely fine. You can do that. But let's have a little think about your 3rd house for this one, Taurus. So Cancer rules your 3rd house, which is your house of the goddess. In Hellenistic astrology, the 3rd house is where we would come into lessons that have language rather than sort of the written word involved. The third house is where we learn to kind of like communicate and move around the village. It's got a lot to do with our neighborhood. So at a new moon here, it would be a really great time to review your happiness as to where you are right now. It would be a really great time to review your ability to be yourself on the street, to walk around in safety, and to also engage in sort of magical practices that are maybe a little bit more private and esoteric and ancient. I like the disparity or the difference, the polarity between the third and the ninth house, the goddess, the god. So the ninth is quite academic and sort of lofty and huge and expansive, and has us, make pilgrimage, travel to seek out these lessons from a mentor. The third is much more kind of local. So it's kind of a magical moon. I like this one, Taurus, and I think that it's going to give you a lot of scope for how you wish to kind of operate in your neighborhood. There's a lot of emphasis right now, I think, on safety on the street, and that can sometimes feel a little bit precarious. And this new moon is going to allow you a bit of kind of like autonomy over that. You can kind of, I don't know what you say to yourself before you leave the house. I've got a little private ritual that I do enact whenever I leave the house to protect me. Little ritual of protection. Things like salt rituals and burning rituals can really play out in the third house, and they can keep you safe in your neighborhood. It's nice to feel a sense of belonging on your street, in your hometown. It's nice to be able to feel that you're free enough to move around that space as you are, and to be received as you are. These are very important principles of life that are a privilege, actually, for some, and we mustn't take them for granted. There are many parts of the world where there are folks that are not free to be themselves, that are not free to move around as they are, that need to be incredibly street smart to protect themselves. This builds character, this builds resilience. It's also an exhausting thought. And it's something that I've had a funny relationship with as the years have gone by. There has been moments in my life of feeling incredibly out of step with my third house. There's been moments in my life where I felt incredibly embodied in my third house. And so perhaps at this new moon, it might be time to call in some of that embodiment, some of that, maybe bravery is the wrong word. I think embodiment's kind of the perfect word. Like, this is who I am. These are my rituals. This is my privacy. This is how I worship my goddess. That's a lovely thing. Actually, that could just be something you could write down, maybe Taurus. At this new moon in Cancer, I'm going to worship my goddess. It's very important to do that, especially in this kind of work. Now, an hour and a half after this lunation, at 6 a.m. on the 18th, the dragon's head and the dragon's tail are shifting signs finally. The dragon's head is releasing you, Taurus, and entering Aries. So if we cast our minds back to the last 18 months and we think about the energy of eclipses, which do bring with them an enforced release and almost like a wave of receiving. And if we think that the dragon's head has been in your first house of the self, the soul, the essence, and the dragon's tail, the part that's been providing this shedding in your seventh house of relationships and intimacy, it feels like the chapter of lessons or the volume of your life over the last 18 months is coming to its conclusion. There will be one more eclipse in Taurus in October, which will perhaps put the stopper on that journey. But the dragon's head in Aries investigates a different part of your chart. This time it's the 12th house, Taurus. This is your unconscious. This is your hidden realms, parts of you that are maybe difficult to quantify in a tangible sort of sense of reality, something far more kind of strung out and wide. The 12th can sometimes talk about our past experiences on a soul level, can talk about coincidences in our daily life and kind of that feeling that we've been here before, can talk about definitely challenges that have gone before. Sometimes the 12th house can have the connotation of incarceration because of its dealings with different ways of seeing the world, different perspectives, different internal workings, hidden workings of the mind and the self. So we're starting this new chapter, Taurus. We're going to be sort of excavating a lot of gems, a lot of beauty in your 12th house, uncovering perhaps some lines of trauma, some breakaways from that, some kind of honoring rituals of that. And the dragon's tail will be in your 6th house, so we'll be releasing and shedding perhaps some of the ties that bind us to a certain grindstone, to a certain rhythm. We're going to be releasing some shackles maybe as we sort of venture deeper into our hidden parts. Both houses have a lot of like work kind of attached to them, internal work, external work. So this is what we're sort of beginning to work with. As a group, to have the dragon's head so focused on Aries, which is about the individual, it's about the self, and the dragon's tail shedding away Libra, which does much prefer to be in connection, we may start to sort of feel some more tension in our environment. We may start to see some relationships begin to show their hairline fractures. We may begin to sort of start to feel an urgency to express ourselves that's less interested in the way that we cohabitate or collaborate. And that's okay, as long as we come back around. As long as we come back around to kind of, this self-work, this internal work, being able to share that with other folks, being able to kind of reinvigorate the way that we operate with others. We're all experiencing this focus on Aries and release of Libra. So in some ways, I hope that there's some like unhealthy relationships that can be released during this time. I imagine that there's going to be a lot of truth revealed over this time. I imagine that there's going to be a lot of autonomy reclaimed over this time too, which I'm really looking forward to. I'm looking forward to going back over the past and making reparations for things, injustices that occurred before. This is what I'm really looking forward to with this eclipse configuration. The other little bit of tension that we're kind of stepping into, and it's maybe not tension, but it could be, just because it's Venus. Venus will have stationed retrograde in Leo on the 23rd of this month, so a few days after this lunation. And the last time that Venus was retrograde in Leo was in 2015. So it's a little while to sort of travel back to, about 8 years ago now. But I think maybe if we can kind of consider your home life, your like ancestry, your sense of protection and nurturing, how you kind of feel safe and harmonious. Home's a really great word for it. But what was going on in that space in 2015? Was there a kind of like lingering of, it almost feels like Venus is like some sort of siren, especially in Leo. Venus in Leo is really bombastic and really overly articulate and really, really kind of self-assured and really, really like dazzling. This kind of like extra company or longer stay for Venus in Leo in 2015, it like, maybe we can look back to that time and think about how we were feathering our nest, how we were sort of building our home, how we were kind of emphasizing the beauty of that space. Maybe you were moving around in 2015, I'm not sure. Maybe you were kind of like building, I don't know what you would have been doing back then, but there was a focus on like being like house proud, and there was a focus on sort of like developing, you know, a safe place to land. This is coming back into focus. I believe the next 4 months that Venus will be sniffing around in Leo. I think when the planets station retrograde, there's like, we have to go over, we have to sort of like really receive what they're trying to tell us. So it's kind of with the friction between your first and your seventh, yourself and your relationships, maybe this next period of time is going to be something to look forward to in the way of like, well, this is actually how I find safety and pleasure. This is my home. This is how I like it to run. This is what I want to have occur here. This is the invitation. Now I'm rewriting that invitation. I'm not going to sort of maybe share this space the way that I used to, because I've changed since those eclipses, and the way that my relationships operate has also changed. And so now, to come back to the lion's den, it takes a certain type to be invited to come back to this lion's den. Or I wish to maybe like work on this space with you now. Yeah. It's nice, but it's also quite sort of, there is this kind of, everyone's sort of maybe feeling this like push and pull between self and the other and self and the other. It's kind of like, we don't want to get sort of agitated, and we don't want to get angry. We've got to not check our, see, I've been pulling myself back and forth from like what I want to say and what I think I should say with these readings. It's been really funny, Taurus. Like, I think that like anger is really healthy, but it's how it's directed and who it's directed to, and how it's kind of resolved as well. You can't go through life with like fits and starts of like, you know, like lashing out. It doesn't work. What we can do is voice our concerns or voice our intention in a really clear and confident way, and problem solve, resolve discrepancies in the home, or resolve our anger too. It's got to come around to like the deeper cause of that. You know, anger can sometimes be a disguise for fear. I think I said that in the last reading, but it kind of feels like that's really an important thing to remind myself and everybody right now. I am feeling very angry in a beautiful, like searing kind of way. I feel that it's time to mobilize. I feel that it's time to really be direct with my principles and my intention to help community and to stand up for those that can't stand up for themselves. I really feel that. I feel it's really a powerful time for me to use my voice constructively and to say my bit. So maybe you're kind of feeling this too, and sometimes that fire in your belly can be misdirected, and you can sort of lash out at folks that maybe aren't so deserving of that, in that kind of level of intensity, or maybe the aggression is misguided, or maybe the aggression is hiding a bit of fear, a bit of worry. It's completely natural to be feeling these things right now. I also do believe that it's time to be more vocal with our intent, and that we can stand up for folks that can't stand up for themselves, and that we can stake our position and stake our claim in our own identity. We can say, this is who I am, this is who I've always been, and I am not going to be used as a red herring for, I'm not going to be blamed, or I'm not going to be used as a signifier of society falling apart. Society is falling apart. The wheels are in motion. Things are changing. We're going to be looking forward to a great period of time of recommunion and a cooperative sort of existence. I really, really can look forward to that. At the moment, as always, if we look back in history, minorities will be used as the red herring, as the place of blame, taken our jobs, or taken our power, or taken our money, or, taken our values. All of these things people are in fear of losing, especially as a lot of people that have been in a lot of power, that have never had to think about power before, that are now worried about they're going to lose everything. And so their retaliation is to lash out and to place blame. And so the reason I'm saying all of this, Taurus, is because if they can do it, we can also do it too. That can be our impulse, to lash out at folks that might not be so deserving of that. I got the 8 of Swords, the Knight of Pentacles, and the 4 of Pentacles. So I want you to ease these feelings of anxiety a little bit if you can. I want you to recognize that you do have what it takes to set yourself free from this repetition of the mind, that it's natural, that the mind is trying to protect us, bless them, but sometimes they can really get stuck into a certain aspect and really start to drag us through something. And that if it's just a thought, you'll know, because you can check your immediate surrounds, your immediate reality, and recognize that you're safe. And those thoughts can start to sort of ease a little bit. When it comes to what you're building, it's going to take longer than you expected, but there's help on the way, and it is going to work because you are so committed and you are so protective of your growth. It may be humble what you have, but it's going to grow. We also don't need that much to have a happy life. We really don't. We're told that we do because that's the instruction from a philosophy that has growth at all costs. That's the man behind the curtain, Taurus. We're realizing that now, that our happiness and our contentment won't be found in how much we accrue or how much we have. Happiness is found when what we have accrued, is more than enough for us, because our attention is devoted to all of the facets of life, not just our storeroom. Someone or something, an idea, a new perspective is on the way for you, Taurus, and they're going to go the distance with you too. They're in it for the long haul. They're willing to grow this thing with you. So let them in. Let them use their skills as well, put their skills to good use. They're wanting to offer them. So allow that help. And keep it in your mind, that like this life, the end point of success has got nothing to do with how much we have accrued. It's probably got more to do with how much we have taken care of. That's your reading, Taurus. I love you. We're, driving into the skid, I think. There might be some tension over the next couple of weeks. If there is, you can relax into that. let your voice be heard, get angry, but make sure that you're checking yourself and check where your anger is being directed to as well. That's probably some really good advice for this one. If you're still here, throw me a crab in the comments, won't you? I'll be with you in 2 weeks and we're going to talk about the full moon in Aquarius. I can read your birth chart at umaruby.com and you can tip me at buymeacoffee/umaruby. Thank you very much. I love you very much, Taurus. I'll speak to you soon. Bye. Hello, Virgo rising. Welcome to your horoscope for the new moon in Cancer happening on July the 18th at 4:32 p.m. if you're in the Southern Hemisphere with me. 4:32 a.m. I should say. It's an early morning moon. So if you're wanting to do your manifesting magical work, do it the night before on Monday. You can get up early on Tuesday though if you wanted to as well and really sit in the darkness. That's sometimes a really nice feeling, to feel really quiet and before the world has gotten up. But let's have a little think about Cancer, and let's have a little think about your 11th house. Let's have a little think about your sense of kind of community, the communal space, your sense of friendship and good fortune, because this is where I want you to make wishes on. I want you to think about the way that you've developed a sense of friendship. I want you to think about those that really love you and that you really love, and how you put your skills to benefit them, and how your kind of instinct to nurture and to care is used in your environment, in your friendships. There's so much that you offer to the group, Virgo. There's so much concern and kindness that you bring to the table in your 11th house. On a broader scope, the 11th can make us think about the human condition, can't it? It can have us think about a much wider scope and the essence of being a human being. And so, right now, that might be a place that you've got maybe not so much interest in. There might be a reluctance to kind of stick your head out the window and consider how human beings relate to each other. I don't wish for you to feel a responsibility that's up to you to solve the perils of this life, Virgo. I imagine that might be an impulse of yours, that sometimes you might be sort of racking your brain trying to think about how on earth we're going to turn this ship around. That's very natural, and that's very you to be so concerned in that way. I think that the cardinal energy of Cancer, the initiation into an emotional space, is probably where you can really put your emphasis on. We don't sometimes the best way to heal, or the best way to be a valued friend, is to let the other person talk about how they're feeling. Just ask the questions, provide them an open space, an open door to tell you how they've been feeling. There's such value in that action, and not everybody has the kind of, although that's not true, I think that really, I think the majority of us can do that. We've got that skill to sort of open our ears and our heart to our friends and to listen to how they've been feeling. It's just, there's some of us that have been kind of guided into that direction, and there's some of us that have been told that that's weak or that's wrong. That's not something, that vulnerability is weakness. And so that's when the variant sort of comes out in that space. But I think for you, Virgo rising, like this is kind of like, Cancer is really unafraid to go there emotionally. Cancer is the sign that will instigate an emotional connection or an emotional conversation. So at this new moon, I want you to think about your friends first and foremost. I want to think about you to think about your community, your group of mates. I want you to be kind of grateful for them, and I want you to imagine how those relationships are going to develop in time. That's going to be a lovely thing for you to think about as well, Virgo. Like how you can, like, you know, like everything, every relationship needs to be tended to. It's like a plant. You've got to water it. You've got to change its soil. You've got to upkeep, maintenance to maintain these relationships. What I've really learned over this past few years is that there are some relationships that are so hardy and so reliable that you can take, it can be a couple of years that you've not tended to them, but the commitment, the action to go back and to tend to them proves to you just how strong those roots are and how long they've taken. That's not to say that you should, you know, don't take, you know, and can take a friend for granted at all. But what I love is that people are becoming more and more relaxed into the idea that everyone's got their own shit going on, they've got their own lives, and the joy of coming back together can outweigh any feeling of like neglect or things like that. Also, those feelings of neglect or those feelings of, hey, I've missed you, like where have you been? I can't wait to speak to you. I look forward to speaking to you. Those emotions can be voiced as well, because they're not a critique, they're not a like accusation. You can just say them. It's been so long. I've really missed you. I've been so looking forward to seeing you. They're nice things to think about in the 11th house, Virgo. Now, an hour and a half after we have this little love-in, the dragon's head is finally shifting from Taurus into Aries. And so there's been a story from the last 18 months or so that has revealed itself. There's been lessons that have sort of shown up out of the blue, and there's been things that we've really had to let go of over the last 18 months in Taurus and Scorpio. That story is being wrapped up, and there'll be a final lunar eclipse in Taurus on October to put the punctuation on that, to close the volume, and to prepare us to enter into this new series of lessons. So Taurus is your 9th house, which is the house of the god in Hellenistic astrology, and Scorpio is your 3rd house, the house of the goddess in Hellenistic astrology. And the difference between those two spaces, they both talk about communication and knowledge and fine-tuning the mind. The goddess is our village. It's where we learn to communicate in our local environment. And the 9th house is where we travel and where we expand and where we move around. So perhaps over the last 18 months, there's been like a deluge of extra responsibility in your life, or there's been opportunity to travel like there hasn't before, where you've been really seeking out and perhaps learning new skills or learning new ways of practicing. And your local environment has not fallen by the wayside, but there's definitely been villages that have closed down for you over the last 18 months. You've been really like, okay, I don't live here anymore. I don't live here anymore. I don't walk these streets anymore. And this could be a physical space. This could be somewhere in your mind as well. The final eclipse, the final lunar eclipse, will be in Taurus in October. So that will be another kind of like surge to the 9th house. Maybe some more travel. Maybe something will click over in your mind where you're like, yeah, okay, this is making sense to me. I've been doing this kind of like mentorship with someone, and I've been receiving these lessons, or I've been learning about this sort of thing, and now it's making sense to me. That could be the experience in October. For the next 18 months, we're going to be looking at where your focus is in regard to your soul contracts. The 8th house is where we're headed. That's where the dragon's head will be facing. So there's going to be an emphasis on connection. There's going to be an emphasis on the way that your resources are interwoven with someone else's, the contracts that we sign in this life. And the dragon's tail is going to be allowing you to shed in your resources, your finances, your values. A shedding in your value system is really interesting to me, Virgo. There may be things that you held dear that don't jive with you anymore. There may be certain ways of focus that don't make sense to you anymore. There may be a reconfiguration of your value system themselves. Perhaps over the next 18 months, there's going to be something around, well, I mean, this is how I used to, live my life and get by and move through. These were my responsibilities. This is who I was aligned with and who I was devoted to. What's showing up here now? Is this space expanding for me? Is this space moving and changing? A relationship with integration or collaboration. There might be some over stimulation in your collaborative space. It might be expanding, might be growing. And so your values in your 2nd house will need to shed. You'll need to think, well, I can't just be concerned with that anymore. I've got to be concerned with this now. It's exciting stuff. There was the first eclipse in Aries was a couple of months ago. Maybe you can go back in. I should put them into playlists, shouldn't I? There's too much work. The last Aries eclipse was like a prelude to this space. So maybe there might be some messages in there for you. Collectively, we are looking at a period of time where the individual is in focus and relationships, or the way that we relate to one another, is falling away. This can be looked at in a bunch of different ways, hopefully for the better. Hopefully there'll be a sense of justice or injustice that is shedding. And hopefully the rights of the individual will be put into sharper focus. Hopefully we won't be considered as a populace of cogs in a machine. That's something that I really feel is really on tenterhooks right now. It's frustrating for some people because they don't know what else to do. It's frustrating because they've kind of lived their whole lives with the idea that they've had to be in service to this growth machine, that's the point of life. That we get a car loan, a house loan, a bank loan, a personal loan, this, that, the other, that we live in debt. We work our whole lives until we pay it all off and then we're dead. That's rapidly becoming a way of life that is just makes no sense to more and more people. We can't have growth at all costs. The world won't allow it. The planet itself won't allow it. In that way, describing it in that way, Virgo, I'm thinking about your values. I'm thinking about your 2nd house and what may shed over this next 18 months. What we might need to be mindful of is just the way that we're sort of speaking to one another. That could be something that's really comes into kind of sharper focus over the next couple of weeks, is the way that we talk to each other. Because there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot that's building, and there could be some misdirected or misguided aggression that sort of bubbles its way to the surface. And that's all right, but we've just got to keep our eyes on the prize as to what we're feeling, who we're saying it to, and if it's their burden and responsibility to carry alone, or if this is something bigger. Now, on the 21st of July so a couple of days, 3 days after this new moon, this is probably why I was speaking about that talking to each other thing. Mars will be forming an exact opposition to Saturn. So this is your first house of yourself, your soul, and your seventh house in Pisces of your relationships. So Saturn is in Pisces, Mars will be in Virgo. And so you can see that sort of sharpness and that face off. Mars can bring with it anger. And so if that anger is misdirected, or if that anger is directed to your seventh house, to your relationships, not misdirected, but just be mindful of how you're talking, how you're expressing yourself, how you're getting your point across. If you're frustrated with your partners, that's fine, that's natural, that's completely normal. That's what relationships are. We get frustrated with each other. That's completely, perfectly fine. It's how we work with that frustration and how we get our point across and how we listen to the other person as well from their perspective, what they've been feeling, what they see as the relationship too. That's the key. So there's been restriction in your relationships. Saturn's going to be there for the next couple of years. There will be. I look at it as valuable. I think that maybe it's because I'm a Capricorn sun, but Saturn, the boundary, the rule book, is kind of good for us, especially for Pisces, because they can sort of disappear. Your frustration might be growing, Virgo, with them. So we've got to remember, is it the external pressure of life right now on this planet? Is it their behavior? Is it a bit of both? Whichever way it is, you can be the Queen of Swords. You can tell them directly with truth and clarity and love and honesty that they're full of shit. That's fine. You can do that. You can get frustrated that their head is in the clouds, that they're sort of not landing on anything, that there's too many options, but also no options, that they're sort of like lost in the abyss. You can say all of that and you can be really austere about it, Virgo. You've got my permission. But recognize that you're about to enter into an incredibly bold new cycle together, that the next phase, this kind of marker point of the nodes shifting, is a brand new turn around the wheel. And so everyone's going to be feeling this in different ways, but it's like 18 months ahead. You're working on something and it's going to take longer than you expected. But what I feel is that the person here is in it for the long haul, and they do have skills that they can contribute to this thing that you're growing. They maybe don't recognize their skills yet, but they can with your encouragement. And they can by taking a good hard look at themselves too and being like, well, actually, I am good at this. I can do this. I do have the skills for this. I'm not going anywhere. The anxiety that comes up when entering something, making a commitment to something so big and so new and so bold, it can have us in knots. We can start to feel like caged in by it too. Sometimes there can be a bit of like, a compulsion to push away from what we've committed to because we don't think we've got the stuff. We're too scared to do it. But the Eight of Swords is not in a cage. It looks like one, but actually they can just walk forwards. There's no swords in front of them. That blindfold can come off. Those ropes can be like sliced off. The emotion that's pushing through this dry earth, the water, is probably going to be helpful, because if we talk about how we're feeling, then we can get it out of us and get it on the table, and then it can be assessed and looked at. If we keep it in, that's when it becomes quicksand, right? That's your reading. Good luck with it. New moon in Cancer in your 11th house. So enjoy what possibilities linger in your friendships and community, and maybe rely on some of those friendships for guidance, and to allow that space to be the space where you can say how you feel. If things are sticky in the 7th house, if there's anger brewing or frustration, then look to your friends to get it off your chest. Okay, Virgo, that's your reading. I'll be with you in 2 weeks for the full moon in Aquarius. You can get your birth chart read by me at umaruby.com. You can tip me at buymeacoffee.com/umaruby. If you're still here with me, throw me a crab in the comments. That would be very helpful to get my work circulating. I love you, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Enjoy the moon. Bye.